This video is on 6.6a, or fraction multiplication. The first step would be to put all numbers in proper or improper fractional form. Then we'll multiply across the numerators and then the denominators. Step 3 is to simplify your answer. And step 4, sometimes you need to convert your answer to a whole or mixed number. When you're trying to get it into fractional form, if it's already a proper or improper fraction, you're going to leave it alone. So 3/4 is a proper fraction. It has just a numerator and denominator, and a proper fraction is when the numerator is smaller and the denominator is bigger. 7/2 is an improper fraction, so we're going to leave that one alone as well. And here we have a numerator and denominator, but the numerator in this case is bigger than the denominator. 7/10 is another example of a proper fraction that we would leave alone. 9/4, if we see this, we're going to leave this one alone because it is in fractional form and it is an improper fraction. If you have a mixed or whole number, you'll need to convert it to an improper fraction. You can't convert a proper fraction, so we're going to change this whole number, or 6 wholes. We have 6, and the denominator for a whole is going to be 1 because it's 1 whole, or in this case 6 wholes. For a mixed number, we're going to multiply the denominator and the whole number, and then add the numerator, and 8 times 2 is 16, plus 3 is 19, and we'll keep the denominator the same. And now that is an improper fraction. So it would be ready for fraction multiplication. Here, 6 2/3, we go 6 times 3 is 18, and 18 plus 2 is 20, and we're going to keep the denominator the same, and now it's an improper fraction that would be ready for multiplication. Once we have everything in fractional form, then we're going to multiply straight across. So we're going to multiply across the numerators. 3 times 5 is 15. Then we're going to multiply across the denominators, and 7 times 9 is 63. 8 times 9 and 3 times 4, we're going to multiply the numerators to get 72 and the denominators to get 12. Here we would do 3 times 16 and then 4 times 9 to get my new numerator. So 3 times 16 is going to give me 48, and 4 times 9 is going to give me 36. We're going to multiply across the numerators and then across the denominators, and 7 times 4 is going to give me 28. 8 times 1 would give me 8. The third step would be to simplify your final answer. And when we simplify, we want to see if both the numerator and denominator are divisible by 2, 3, 5, or 7. And normally if you look for 2, 3, and 5, and none of those factors go into the numerator and denominator, then that's normally good. But there's always a chance that more could go in. Now, they're not even, they don't end in 5 or 0, so we can get rid of 2 and 5 right away. But I do see that 3 goes into 15 5 times, and 3 goes into 63 21 times. Then I'm going to look for 7, and 7's too big, so we know that 5 over 21 is going to be that simplified answer. I see that they're both even, so I'm going to divide by 2. And 72 divided by 2 gives me 36, and 2 goes into 12 6 times. Now I'm not done with 2. If they're even and I could divide by 2 again, I want to keep on using that 2 until I can't divide any longer. And 36 divided by 2 is 18, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. And now I'm done dividing by 2, so I'm going to cross that out. But I need to check other ones. I see that 18 and 3 are both divisible by 3, and would give me 6 over 1. Now, 3's done, 5 and 7 can't go into any of those numbers, but I also see that 6 divided by 1 is going to equal 6. This next one, we're going to try 2 first because they're both even. 8 and 6 are even numbers, so I know 2 will go into 48 24 times, and 2 will go into 36 18 times. They're still even, so I'm going to continue dividing by 2. And I could have found bigger numbers to go in here. I could have seen that 4 went into both of them and divided earlier by 4 instead of by 2 twice. Now 12 and 9 you can divide by 3, so I get 4/3, and 5 and 7 don't go into either of those numbers because they're too big, so 4/3 is in simplest form. 28 and 8, I see that these are even, so I'm going to divide by 2. And I see that 28 and 8 could be divided by 4. So I could have divided by 4 to get 7/2 instead of dividing the numerator and denominator by 2 twice. And I know this is simplified because none of those numbers go into 7 and 2 again. Now our fourth step is once we have our final answer, we're going to convert it to a mixed or whole number. Now this is a proper fraction, so it's already done. We can't convert it to a mixed or whole number. 6 wholes is equal to 6, and we can see this because 6 divided by 1 is equal to 6 with nothing left over. So 6 over 1 is kind of like 6 divided by 1, which would give us 6. 4/3, we're going to convert that to a mixed number, and if you think about it as 4 divided by 3, we're not changing this to a decimal, so we want to find a remainder, and 3 goes into 4 one time with 1 left over, so we have 1 whole time, and 3/3 would give you that 1 whole, and I'm going to have 1 of those thirds left over. And you can draw a picture to kind of see why this is happening, but if I draw some thirds and I color in 4 of those thirds, I'm going to color in 3/3 of this first circle, and that's going to give me the 1 whole, and then 1/3 of the other circle. So I colored in 4. I colored in 1, 2, 3, 4 of those thirds, and it gave me 1 1/3. We can also kind of think about it how we know that 3 is going to stay as the denominator, and 3 times 1 would give me 3. And then 3 plus another 1 would give me 4. So I can kind of use that little U-turn that we did in step 1 to double check that that mixed number and that improper fraction are the same or equal. For 7/2, we could do 7 divided by 2. We see that 2 times 3 is 6, and 6 plus 1 is 7. So 7/2 equals 3 1/2. And we can double check that here to see that 2, 4, 6, 8, we know that I can make 3 whole groups of 2, but I would have 1 extra left over. And that would give me 3 1/2. Now we're going to apply those 4 steps. So we need to remember that step 1 is to get both numbers into fractional form. So if I look at problem number 1, I'm going to make sure that they're in fractional form before I do anything else. And 3/4 and 5/6, those are both proper fractions. So I don't have to do anything to set this problem up. Now I'm going to multiply across the numerators and then multiply across the denominators. So 3 times 5 and 4 times 6 will give me the new numerator and the new denominator. So 3 times 5 is 15 and 4 times 6 is 24. So now I've multiplied across and completed step 2. Step 3 is once I have my answer, I need to make sure it is in simplest form. So I'm going to simplify. When I simplify, I'm going to look for 2, 3, 5, and 7. And if none of those go in, then it is in simplest form. I'm going to divide by 3 because they're not even, and I see that 3 goes in evenly. 15 divided by 3 is 5, and 24 divided by 3 is 8. And 3 doesn't go in anymore, and 5 and 7 don't go in, so 2, 3, 5, and 7, none of those go in anymore. Then I know 5/8 is in simplest form. Now that's one of our answers, but sometimes they want your final answer to be in a mixed or whole number form. So we're going to convert 5/8 to a mixed or whole number, but I can't. So there is no mixed or whole number form because 5/8, when the numerator is smaller than the denominator, 5/8 is a proper fraction. So when you have a proper fraction, that proper fraction is less than 1 whole. If I eat 5/8 of a pizza, that's less than one whole pizza. So I can't have a whole number when the smallest whole number is 1, and a mixed number is going to be bigger than 1. So a proper fraction, by definition, since it's less than 1, it can't be a whole number, and it can't be equal to a mixed number. So there is no equivalent mixed or whole number form when you have a proper fraction as your final answer. On to question number 2. Step 1, 7/5 is an improper fraction, and 10 wholes, we're going to put that 10 over 1 to make it that into fractional form. So the numerators and denominators, we're going to move on to step 2 and multiply across. And 7 times 10 is 70, and 5 times 1 in the denominator is 5. But make sure you don't go 5 times 10 and 7 times 10. Make sure you put that 1 underneath that 10 to get the correct denominator. Now for step 3, we're going to simplify our fractional form answer. And I see they both end in 0 or 5, so I'm going to divide by 5. 5 goes into 5 one time, and 5 goes into 70 14 times. So 5 went into 7 one time with 2 left over, and 5 went into 20 4 times. And I see that my final fractional answer is going to be 14 over 1. That's 14 wholes. So whenever we see it over 1, then our final whole number answer would be 14. For question number 3, we are going to change both of these to fractional forms. So our whole number is going to go over 1, and then 2 and 4/5, we're going to do 2 times 5 is 10. So we're going to keep the denominator, and 2 times 5 is 10 plus 4 is 14. So 2 and 4/5 is equivalent to 14/5, so we're going to replace that in fractional form. Step 2, we are going to multiply across the numerators, and then we are going to multiply across the denominators for our fractional answer. So 3 times 14 is going to give me 42, and 5 times 1 is going to give me 5. So now I've completed step 2, and I need to move on to simplifying. So when I'm thinking about simplifying, I need to be looking for 2, 3, 5, and 7 if they go in here. They're not both even, so I can't divide by 2. 3 doesn't go into 5, 5 goes into 5, but not 42, and 7 doesn't go in. So if none of those numbers go in, it is probably already in your simplified form. Now step 4, I'm going to try to change it into a mixed number. So we know if I'm going from a mixed number to an improper fraction, that the denominator is going to stay the same. So I want to know 5 times what would give me really close to 42 without going over. And 5 times 8 is 40. So if I have 5 times 8 give me 40, I need to add 2 more before I get to 42. And I see that 8 and 2/5 would be equivalent to 42 and 42/5. I could have also looked at 42/5 like a division problem. And 5 goes into 4 0 times, but 5 goes into 42 8 times. That's where we get the 8 wholes. And we have 2 left over. And the remainder of 2, that 2 is going to be the numerator. So it goes in 8 whole times with a remainder of 2 of those fifths that are left over. Step 1 is to get both of these into fractional form. So 4 times 1 is 4, 4 plus 1 is 5. And 1 and 1/4 is the same thing as 5/4. 3 times 3 is 9, and 9 plus 2 is 11. So 3 and 2/3 is the same thing as having 11/3. And now that they are in fractional form, we're going to multiply across the numerators and multiply across the denominators. So 5 times 11 is 55, and 4 times 3 is 12. And I have 55/12 as my answer. And I'm going to need to simplify my answer. So I have 2, 3, 5, and 7. They're not even, so I can't divide by 2. 3 doesn't go into 55, and 5 and 7 don't go into both of those numbers. So it is not evenly divisible by 2, 3, 5, or 7. That means 55/12 is already in simplest form. So I could do 55 divided by 12, and 12 goes into 55. Well, 12 goes into 5 0 times. It goes into 55 4 times, and 4 times 12 is 48. And I can't do 5 minus 8, so I'm going to borrow from this other 5 to make it 4, and 15 minus 8 is 7, and 4 minus 4 is 0. So it goes into 55 4 times with a remainder of 7. So I can make 4 wholes, and I'm going to have 7 of those 12ths left over. So 12 times 4 is 48, and then 48 plus 7 is 55. So I know that 55/12 and 4 7/12 are equivalent. For question number 5, we are going to start with step 1 once more. And 5 times 7 is 35, plus 1 is 36. So 5 1/7 is equivalent to 36/7. Then we're going to multiply that by 5/6. And I'm not going to change this because this proper fraction is already in fractional form. So now that we have numerators and denominators, we're going to multiply across the numerators and across the denominators. And if I want to do a little shortcut, I can actually simplify before I multiply. But this is a pro tip. So if you're having trouble with this, skip this part. Write it down in your notebook though. So I can take one numerator and divide by 6, and take one denominator and divide by 6. So if I find a common factor in either numerator and match that up with either denominator, I can simplify before I multiply. So I get 6 times 5 is 30, and 7 times 1 is 7. So let's double check that my original method is going to work. So I can simplify diagonal, but I can't simplify 7 and 6. I can't simplify 36 and 5. I can't divide the numerator and the numerator. It has to be one numerator and one denominator. So let's double check that this actually works. 36 times 5. That is a big multiplication problem, but 36 times 5 is 180, and 7 times 6 is 42. So I've multiplied across, and now I'm going to simplify. So I'm going to divide by 2, 3, 5, 7. Can't divide by 5, and I see that they're both even, so I could divide by 2. So 180 divided by 2 is going to give me 90, and 42 divided by 2 is going to give me 21. And then I see that they're both divisible by 3, so I'm going to divide 90 by 3 to get 30, and 21 divided by 3 gives me 7, and I get the same answer. I can't divide by any other one, so I know that's simplified. And my final fractional answer is going to be 37, and I got that with both methods. So either one works, and you go with the one that is more comfortable to you. If I'm changing that to a mixed number, I see that 7 goes into 34 times with a remainder of 2. So it goes in 4 whole times with 2 of the 7ths left over. Let's double check. 7 times 4 is 28, plus 2 is 30, and yeah, 4 and 2 sevenths is equivalent to 30/7. Now, step 1 is going to be to change both of these to fractional form. 8 times 2 is 16, plus 1 is 17. So 2 1/8 is equal to 17/8. And if I do 5 times 3 is 15, and 15 plus 1 is 16, I see 3 1/5 is equal to 16/5. Now I am done putting them in fractional form. Step 2 is to multiply across the numerators and across the denominators. 17 times 16, I don't want to do that. So let me try my shortcut. I know that I could divide 16 by 8 to give me 2, and 8 by 8 to give me 1. So this shortcut, I can do 17 times 2 to give me 34, and 1 times 5 to give me 5. And if I go to try to simplify that, They're not both even, so I can't divide by 2, and 3 doesn't go into 5, 5 goes into 5, but not 34, and 7 doesn't go into either of them. So I see that 34/5 is already simplified because I simplified before I multiplied. Let's see what that would look like with our normal steps. 8 times 5 is 40, and 17 times 16 is going to take you a little bit of time to do on the side, but that gives you 272. That is going to be more difficult to simplify, but I do see that they're both even, so I'm going to divide both of those, the numerator and denominator, by 2, and 40 divided by 2 is 20, and 272 divided by 2 is 136. They're still even, so I'm going to divide by 2 once more, get 10 as the denominator, and I'll get 68 as the numerator. They're still even, so I'm going to divide by 2 once more, and 10 divided by 2 is 5, 68 divided by 2 is 34. I got the same answer, but I think my shortcut can be a bit easier. Now that we know 34/5 is our final fractional answer, we can do 34 divided by 5 and see that 5 goes into 34 6 times, because 6 times 5 is 30, and I'm going to have a remainder of 4. So 5 goes into 34 6 whole times, with 4 of those fifths left over. And 5 times 6 is 30, plus 4 is 34, so I see that 34/5 is equal to 6 4/5.